Just hit the X mark on that at the top right of the window. Maximize the Zoom meeting screen. Now, on the bottom left where you see mute,
I can come over here. I can see this. Is the reading I couldn't see. Okay. Hold on. Okay.
click the up arrow right beside it. All right,
Oh,
needs to
Lord.
be on echo canceling. All right, it's set correct.
I can't see it. It is?
Yep. Now usually what I do is I do mute.
Planning, Nate Sturgis, and our zoning officer, Beth Graham. We also have present this evening, court reporter. We have two cases, new cases on the agenda tonight. And this board will hear each case plus any old business in an informal manner without strict compliance with rules of procedure in a court trial. We asked each applicant and any individuals interested in a particular case to step in front of the table and explain the circumstances involved in their application. Applicants may present their case themselves or through their attorneys or other representatives. Fellow board members and I, as well as the solicitor, may ask the applicant questions from time to time during the applicant's presentation or at its conclusion. All persons having an interest in the application will be given an opportunity to ask the questions of the applicant, offer evidence of their own, and to inform the board of their position on the matter. In the interest of prompt and orderly disposition of the case, we ask the interested people to refrain from speaking until the applicant's presentation has been completed and the board has had the opportunity to question the applicant. At the beginning of each case, people who are interested in the case should decide whether they desire to be parties to it. By being given the status of a party, that person will be entitled to receive notice of the decision in that case and will be entitled to participate in any subsequent appeal or rehearing. Individuals who are not given party status may nevertheless ask questions and present evidence, but will not receive notice of the decision and will not automatically be entitled to participate in any appeal or subsequent rehearing. If you desire to be a party, we will ask that you sign an entry of appearance form at the appropriate time. And although each party will receive a written copy of the decision, the mechanics of typing and signing the decision takes approximately 4 weeks. We ask that each person who asks a question or makes a statement first state his or her name and address for the court reporter. Now, lastly, in the interest of time, I'll administer the oath of affirmation to all applicants and to everyone and anyone who anticipates making any statement with respect to the cases this evening. So at this time, would you please all rise? Under penalties of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. Thank you. Stay standing. We'll salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Beth, the cases this evening have been advertised and posted in accordance with Sunshine Law and the municipality's planning code.
They have been.
Thank you. Just for everyone's notice, beside appearance, participation, we also are on Zoom. And do we have anybody on Zoom at this time?
None.
Okay. Although they may enter at any time. Gentlemen, you had received, excuse me, copy of the September 19th, 2022 board minutes as presented by the secretary. There are no additions, deletions, or corrections. I listened to a motion on the board minutes of September 19th.
I do have one correction.
Mr. Hanson.
Sorry, Beth just found it. On the second page. third paragraph down, third sentence. Removed along Route 230 should be Route 30, not 230.
Anything else, gentlemen? Seeing none, then can I have a motion to approve the September 19th, 2022 board minutes with the change as proposed by Mr. Hanson?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Luce. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kyle. Discussions, gentlemen? Seeing none, Mr. Hanson,
In favor.
Mr. Luce,
In favor.
Mr. Kyle.
In favor.
I'll also vote in favor. The board minutes of 2019-2022 have been approved with the correction on page 2 under case 2453, third paragraph. Okay, Beth, any old business? Okay, with that then, Beth, the first case, please.
Case number 2455 Shanks Extracts, 451 Richardson Drive, seeking a variance of the setback regulations.
Okay, is someone here from Shanks Extracts?
Claudia Shank.
Representative?
Yes, Claudia Shank from McNeese Wallace and Nurick on behalf of Shanks Extract.
Okay, is there anyone else in the audience and or on Zoom that wants to be a party to this case? Seeing none? Shank, would you
If-
like to proceed?
If I could, I'd like to start by handing out some copies of pre-marked exhibits.
Please. Thanks. Cheryl, excuse me, what did you mark them as? Okay.
So good evening, board members. I am Claudia Shank with McNeese Wallace and Nurick. I'm here this evening on behalf of Shanks Extracts LLC. I'm joined this evening by Kevin Ember with Ritu, who is the civil engineer for this project. I'm also joined by Paul Brooker, who is here on behalf of Shanks Extracts. If you turn to Exhibit 1 in your packet, you'll see an aerial map of the property that we're here to discuss this evening. The property that we're here to discuss is labeled as 451. It's identified as the subject property on the map that's in front of you. It's approximately 3.23 acres in size, and it's improved with a 72,000 square foot commercial building. It is located in the township's enterprise zoning district. It's part of a campus of properties that Shanks owns, all of which are identified on the map and include 350 Richardson Drive and 351 Richardson Drive, 350 being primarily a manufacturing site for Shanks currently. As you can see, the property is encircled by Richardson Drive, making it almost functionally operate like a corner lot. And the building itself is a lawfully pre-existing non-conforming structure as to both the front and rear yard setbacks. The property is served both by public water and sewer. Shanks is proposing to retrofit this building so that it can accommodate manufacturing operations as well as some office and administrative uses. Currently, it's just a facility that's used for storage. And in connection with that proposed reuse of the building, there is a plan to reallocate some of the parking on the site, to reconfigure the location and number of dumpsters on the property, to construct a walking path along the northern road frontage of the property, and to construct certain accessory structures on the property, which we'll describe in greater detail for you as we walk through the site plan. There are 4 variance requests that are before the board this evening associated with the proposed redevelopment or reuse of this building. The first 2 requests are functionally the same request, but they do relate to different sections of the zoning ordinance. So the first is a variance from section 270-3.12E2. And that is to authorize accessory silo structures within the front yard of the property, but no less than 40 feet from the Richardson Drive right-of-way, as shown on the plan. The second variance is, again, essentially the same request, but it's from a different section of the zoning ordinance. The first section I mentioned relates to regulation of accessory structures in the enterprise district. The second section, 270-410C2, is just a general regulation pertaining to accessory structures in all districts. The third variance is from section 270-4.4B1, and that is to authorize trash dumpsters to be located in the front yard of the property. And then finally, we're also seeking a variance from section 270-84B1 to eliminate the 10-foot setback requirement for proposed off-street parking spaces, to the extent that the board feels that variance is required. So with that by way of background, I'm going to have Mr. Ember come forward at this time. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the board?
You can raise that or take it out of the stand, whichever is easier for you. Yeah, right.
I don't think we have anybody on Zoom, so just talk loud for now and yeah.
Kevin Ember from the two associates. We are the site engineer on the project. As far as myself, I've been employed at the two as a project manager. My background is as a landscape architect. Graduate degree at Penn State University.
And how long have you been employed at Rato?
Two of them employed just over
And what about as a civil engineer generally?
around 18 years as a landscape architect working in city.
Could you turn to what's been marked as Exhibit 3 in the packet?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, can we, since his resume is attached here, can we just go ahead and speed this up and assume that he's qualified to be?
Ms. Shank, do you want it? Are you going towards?
Yes, my
asking that
intent is to establish him as an expert.
We will accept him as an expert, based on what it was supplied as part of your, submittal.
Thank you.
Before we go on, the three parts, is this applicant's exhibit 1 or are these separate exhibits?
I would intend to treat them as separate exhibits, applicants
so-
1, 2, and 3.
Okay, I just need that for administrative purposes, but thank you.
Understood. So Kevin, turn if you could to Exhibit 2 in the packet. Is that a copy of the site plan that your office prepared for this project?
Yes.
Can you please walk the board through the improvements that are depicted on the plan?
Yeah, so as related to the zoning variance requests, the silos are located generally at the southwest corner of the existing building. There's 5 total proposed silos, that 3 of which we're showing that would be within the front yard area, and 2 of which are currently shown in the side yard area to the south of the existing building. There would also be some other improvements that would be compliant as far as the zoning ordinance with a chiller and also a cooling tower on the south side of the building. And that would all be to support the internal change in the manufacturing use of the building. The dumpsters you can see are located just to the south of the existing main access drive that's fronts on the west side of the building. And that's also where there are existing loading docks. there would be two additional proposed loading docks on that side of the building, which would also eliminate about 5 parking spaces that are currently located there. And then moving around to the north side of the building is the proposed reconfigured parking lot. So some of the reason for that reconfiguration was to try to gain some additional parking spaces on that side without adding an additional driveway that would access onto Richardson Drive. Currently, there's 2 driveways, but the parking spaces essentially parallel Richardson Drive. So it's basically acting as the circulation, whereas in this configuration, someone could pull in and pull out and access the full area of the parking lot.
And the purpose of all of these changes is so that the building can be converted to a manufacturing operation.
Correct,
And that is a permitted use in this zoning district, correct?
correct.
With regard to the proposed silos that you mentioned, how tall will those structures be?
So the maximum height would be 40 feet for the 2 tallest silos, which would contain raw material sugar.
And 3 of the 5 proposed silos are slightly within the front yard setback. Is that correct?
Yes, so 2 of them, I believe, are within the front yard setback, but 3 of them along the west side building would all be within the front yard area.
And what is the setback?
So I believe for the accessory use, it's not permitted in the front yard, but we would be proposing a 40-foot max, which would be equal to the maximum height.
So be set back at least to the height of the structure itself.
Correct.
Can you explain why the silos are proposed in the front yard rather than in a side or a rear yard?
Yeah, essentially, because of the layout of the lot, it doesn't allow for other areas to park a truck that would be used to fill the materials with the raw material. So the idea would be that that truck would park next to the proposed dumpsters on the west side of the building and be within a certain distance, approximately 100 feet, to be able to fill those silos. So that also makes the most sense with the internal building configuration of the manufacturing processes, as well as the external location of where they would be filling the silos.
And you'll agree with me that the property is unique in terms of the amount of street frontage that it has.
Yes.
With regard to the proposed dumpsters, can you again point out for the board where those are located and explain how that location was selected?
Yeah, so they're shown just south of the existing main access drive that enters the site where there's existing loading docks. There's 2 proposed roll-off dumpsters there adjacent to the building. And again, there's really no way with the configuration of the lot. And there's also an existing stormwater easement which wraps around the southwest corner of the building where there's existing stormwater facilities. There's no other good location to place them where they could be accessed without being in a front yard area.
With regard to the dumpsters specifically, is the applicant proposing anything to mitigate the effect of the appearance of the dumpsters?
Yeah, we would be also proposing screening to meet ordinance requirements as part of a stormwater or land development plan submission.
And would that consist of privacy fence?
It would most likely be privacy fence and or vegetation to meet the screening requirements.
There's also a requirement, section 270-8.4B1, related to the proximity of the parking to lot lines. Specifically that parking is not to be within 10 feet of a street right of way in a lot containing 5 or more spaces. So can you explain again, just briefly for the board, the proposed changes to the parking configuration adjacent to Richardson Drive?
Sure. So the existing parking is already encroaching onto that 10-foot setback requirement.
Excuse me,
Mr. Hanson?
there's a pointer there. Could you point out on that screen what as you're going on?
So essentially, there's 5 existing parking spaces here that would be eliminated with a new loading dock. And then there's also existing parking lots here and in this area. It's a little hard to see the existing configuration with our proposed over top. But essentially, the parking spaces right now are more parallel to the roadway. So there's two existing drives and spots off both those driveways. And what we're proposing is to reconfigure that so it would be more this loop configuration with the main parking spots would be perpendicular then to the roadway and the building. And then the existing driveways would be relocated slightly, but we wouldn't be adding an additional driveway. And then there were 2 parking spaces additional proposed here that would also be essentially proposing a 0-foot setback from the right of way for the proposed parking spaces. And as you can see here, we already have that condition on the south side of that parking lot.
So there's no increase to the nonconformity. It's just in keeping with an existing nonconformity on the site.
Correct. It's just a reconfiguration of the existing parking.
We've already talked about this to some extent, but could you just reiterate for the board the conditions of this property that make it challenging to develop in conformity with the zoning ordinance?
Sure. So with the Richardson Drive curvilinear shape around the property, it essentially leads to one main front yard area with little way to access the side and rear yards. There's a pinch point with the building here. And then, as I mentioned, there's an existing stormwater easement with stormwater basin in this facility. And there's also a existing small stream that bisects the property at 451 and the property to the south. So with that configuration, essentially, there's not a way to provide access to put these proposed facilities in a side or rear yard area.
Were any of the conditions that you just described created by the applicant?
No.
Are you familiar with the neighborhood where this property is located?
Yes.
In your opinion, will the variances, if approved, impair the character of that neighborhood?
I don't believe so. It's all mostly same sort of manufacturing warehouse type use.
Do you believe that the variances would impact the development of adjacent property?
No, I don't.
Do you think they would have any negative impact on the streetscape or the character of the surrounding area?
I don't think so. Again, given that the proposed use is consistent with existing surrounding uses.
And has this plan been designed to include the minimum relief necessary for the reasonable redevelopment of this building and property for manufacturing use?
Yes, we believe it has. And as mentioned with the reconfiguration of the parking lot, we believe it would be a safer configuration with less access into the public right away.
I don't have any additional questions for Mr. Ember. Mr. Brooker will be testifying, but want to give the board an opportunity to ask Mr. Ember any
Questions, gentlemen?
questions.
Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Ember, the 5 proposed silos, are they going to be on cement pads?
Yeah, they would be on a cement pad that would be just slightly larger than the silo itself.
And I'm assuming that was all added in with the total lot coverage.
Yeah, we'll be analyzing that for a future stormwater plan submission.
The roll-off dumpsters, am I correct? Did I hear you correctly say they are going to be screened?
Yes, I believe there, regardless of the location, there are screening requirements in the ordinance that we'll comply with.
With where are you proposing that screening? Because where you have them drawn on your plan here, and then you have that proposed loading space for the silos, that doesn't give you much room if you're backing a tractor trailer in there.
Yeah, I think the idea would be we would be essentially screening this whole concrete pad area that would include that area for the truck to back into. So it would be around this side of this proposed concrete pad.
Okay. Yeah, I would prefer that. Ms. Shank, would your client have any objection if we made that a condition that that whole pad had to be screened?
No.
And there is only one parking space that encroaches on the right of way, correct? And that is existing, correct?
There's one parking space here, but then there's existing parking.
No. There's one that exists and you're not going to increase that non-conformity, correct? That
Correct.
first one right there,
Not here. That would remain as is.
but you're not going to increase that. Everything will be right abutting to the right of way, correct?
Correct. We're not proposing to encroach across the right of way.
The overhead view, the applicant's number one. All three of these properties are owned by Shank Extracts, correct?
Correct.
And they're all separate, deeded separately, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions, gentlemen? Mr. Kyle?
What is the height of the existing building?
Don't have that offhand. Mr. Brooker may be able to answer that.
Okay.
Mr. Hanson?
You said the silos will not exceed the height of the existing building, is that correct?
They would not exceed 40 feet. Sure offhand, if that would, I believe the existing building is under 40 feet.
Okay.
And where did the 40 feet come from?
The 40 feet is what is proposed for the maximum height of the silo per the storage capabilities they need.
And that's the maximum permitted height for an accessory structure. Is that correct?
I believe that would be the maximum permitted for the setback we have from the right of way for the accessory structure.
What is the diameter of those silos?
They would be a 12-foot diameter.
So I guess my issue is you're going to 40 feet. Accessory structures are only allowed a height of 20 feet in the enterprise zone.
There are no height limitations for accessory structures in the enterprise.
My zoning ordinance says 15 in the side yard and 20 feet in the rear yard.
For the height,
I'm sorry, that's setbacks. My bad. I'm sorry, did you answer the diameter question?
Yeah, it would be a 12-foot diameter, and then the concrete base, I believe, would be 14 feet.
Thank you.
I got a couple questions. One is, where the parking or unloading area is for the trucks coming in, which is beside the dumpsters. How are you going to get material from that, truck to the silos?
Mr. Brooker could probably answer that in more detail, but I believe there would be a a hose that attaches and it basically blows it into the silo.
So what's the distance between that parking unloading spot and the first silo closest to it?
The first one, I believe, is approximately 50 feet.
And do you have to load each silo separately? Or would they somehow, you load one, it flows into the others?
I believe they're separate, but Mr. Brooker could probably answer that.
Okay, then I'll ask you, but I guess Mr. Booker will answer it. Then what's the distance to the fifth silo?
So there's silos proposed around the. You're
Around the
talking about
corner.
to the south or to the corner? It's approximately was about 100 feet to the corner of the building from where we had that. So it'll be slightly larger for slightly longer distance for these silos, but I believe they are filled by a different process.
Excuse me, I didn't hear the last part.
I believe those are filled by a different process.
Since you're proposing in this diagram that 3 of those 5 silos are in the front yard, why weren't all 5 of them put in the front yard and closer to the unloading site?
It related to the internal layout of the manufacturing equipment and what worked the best to limit additional utility runs.
Okay. I don't know if it was you or Ms. Shank stated that there would be a pathway or walkway around this property. It's not shown on this diagram.
I believe that was just referring to this proposed sidewalk that would extend. Right now, there's currently a sidewalk that basically extends up to this point. So just to allow for better access to this parking lot, we would be proposing to extend that along the
Okay, so it's
frontage.
it's not a pathway, it's more a sidewalk for the internal use of the property itself.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all I have at this point. Jason, any questions of the witness?
Yeah, so as to the height of the accessory structure, so there is no height limit for the accessory structure, but there's nothing restricting accessory structures from being taller than the principal structure? That you're aware of?
No.
No, not that we're aware of.
Okay. And the parking, so the parking, there's currently one that abuts the right of way spot, and then there will be an additional one that also abuts the right of way. Is that correct? There's 2 spots up in the sort of northwest where it curves there, that those spots are abutting the right of way, is that?
Right, and also these spots here would be within the 10-foot right-of-way setback.
And those are all the ones up at the northern edge of the property, those are all new spots, they weren't?
There is existing spots here, that I don't have the exact number of how many are encroaching in the right-of-way currently. But, we're basically realigning them, so they would also be encroaching in the right-of-way.
If you look at Exhibit 1, you can get a better sense of the current configuration of the parking. But there are numerous spots that are encroaching in the setback now, and there will continue to be after the redevelopment. I think what Mr. Hansen was referring to is there's actually one spot that is not going to be relocated as part of this project that appears to be partially within the right of way, and that no additional spots will be
It actually
placed within.
crosses over into the right of way.
That's how it appears. Yeah.
Jason, can I interrupt you for 1 second, please?
Sure.
Ms. Shank, the statement you just made that there's already existing parking within the right of way. Was that ever approved?
I think it's a pre-existing non-conforming condition. I don't know when the property was, or when the building was constructed, but I know when speaking with Nate, I believe most of what's here is pre-existing non-conforming.
As far as we could tell, it hasn't changed much and I believe it was built in the seventies.
So you don't know if it was complying at that time?
We don't have anything
Okay,
going that far
Okay.
back.
thank you. Jason, back to you.
Okay,
Thank you.
and the parking, parking otherwise complies, all the parking otherwise, other than the setback not being compliant, which is non-conforming, but otherwise it all complies with the zoning regulations.
As far as the location or the
No.
numbers.
Because it otherwise meets all the parking standards in the zoning ordinance, aside from the setback.
Yeah, we believe so. As part of the land development, we would be submitting a parking study that would encompass the 3 parcels owned by Shanks and for review and making sure that there's compliance for the number of spots. So this property would be included in that future study.
And did you say that in the southern edge of the property that that's where you have a stormwater basin located down there? Is that?
Yeah, there's an existing stormwater basin in this corner of the property and that easement kind of runs up both the southwest side and the southeast side.
All right, thank you.
Following up on the stormwater question. Why not build up that area to build up the stormwater, a wall in there like it's been done in numerous cases in the township? And then you'd still be able to put all your silos on the south side.
We will be analyzing the stormwater condition as part of the stormwater or land development plan. I believe that the main reason for that was just, like I said, to get closer proximity to where the actual truck would be loading those silos.
Thank you.
Nate, any questions of the witness?
Nope.
Beth? Anything else, gentlemen, of this witness? Anyone in the audience or on Zoom? Do we have anybody on Zoom yet?
You know,
Okay. Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, thank you.
Mr. Brooker? Go ahead and introduce yourself to the board.
Well, excuse me, I'm Paul Brooker. I'm employed by Shanks Extracts as their Director of Engineering.
And can you explain, you heard both Kevin and I refer to the operational changes regarding this building. Can you explain specifically what's proposed and sort of what served as the catalyst for this reuse?
Yeah, Shanks Extracts today makes a lot of their product in 350, as Ms. Shanks indicated. That process that we use at 350 will not work with the particular food sector that we hope to get involved with, and that's what we're doing at 451. The equipment is entirely different than what we currently own, and we need a significant amount of space for this particular process. So that's the reason for making it from a warehouse to a manufacturing zone.
And can you explain in a little bit more detail? There were a couple questions around trucks coming in and how the raw material would be transported to the silos. Can you explain how you envision that will work?
Yeah, you asked about silos. 2 of those silos are for sugar. The other ones are for liquid sugar. After we put sugar into water, as well as we're using a reverse osmosis water system, and those will be surge tanks that'll be sitting out there. The reason that we want to put the silos in the front for the sugar is the proximity for the truck unloading. We have to do that by blowing, and the farther away you get, the harder that is to do. And where the sugar's used inside is directly on inside of there. You had one other question I'm trying to remember. Oh, the height of the building. I'm not exactly sure. I know the inside of the building at the highest point is 24 feet. So the external wouldn't be much more than that.
In terms of the placement of the dumpster, again, could you explain, functionally why that is an ideal location?
Yeah, as Mr. Ember had indicated, because of our lack of driveway access, we needed to be someplace that's a truck can pick that dumpster up and take away the logical places in the front of the building with the other trucks that are there.
Based on the testimony that's been given and the questions that the board has asked, is there anything else that you wish to clarify for the board regarding the project?
Not that I can think of.
I don't have any additional questions for this witness.
Any questions? Mr. Hanson?
You said 2 were gonna be sugar and 3 were gonna be and 3 were liquid, correct?
Correct.
So they're not exactly, all 5 silos, 2 of the silos will look the same and 3 will look the same.
Correct.
That's all I have.
Anything else, gentlemen? Mr. Booker, on the follow-up the question I had of Mr. Ember, how are you getting the liquid and the sugar to those silos from the unloading area?
From the sugar perspective, the rig will back into that location right next to the refuse containers. They carry with them portable hoses. They'll string that directly to the building, and on the outside of the building, we'll have pipe work that will then take the sugar to whichever silo that we designate. They're not connected, so the truck would be going to each individual silo.
Did I understand you said that you will have piping along your building to the silos?
Correct.
So, you would hook up at possibly 2 spots, one for the liquid, one for the sugar, that would run to the appropriate tanks.
No, the liquid will all come from the inside of the building. There will be no truck bringing in any of that liquid in. That's being made. We're changing the water characteristics and then putting that into a holding tank. And same way we'll be adding sugar to that water and then putting it into those tanks to be used later in the process.
Okay, so we'll talk about the liquid tanks. So you're filling the tanks from plumbing from inside the building.
Correct.
Those tanks are going to be holding tanks then, I guess you would call them.
Correct.
And then at some time in the future, you would dispense of that liquid back into the building.
Correct.
For your processing. Okay. Then the 2 sugar tanks, they will be the ones that have the piping running inside or outside the building?
Actually, both. From the truck to get to the silo, there'll be piping on the outside of the building to do that. And then when it comes out of the silo, it'll go into the inside the building to be that sugar then will be used in the process.
Will those pipes be ground level or higher?
Typically on a sugar silo, you load from the top. So that pipe typically follows vertically up with the silo. And at the top, it'll make a U to get inside.
Okay, but the piping till it gets to the silo.
We'd probably keep that closer to ground level.
Okay, so then it would run, and typically at the silo, then it would run up the side of the silos.
Correct.
Okay. Presently, at your building, if I'm not mistaken, there is shrubbery at the location of where those 3 silos are.
There's only one tree at the moment.
But yes, it's from the picture, it looks like it might be shrubbery, but it could be a tree. I presume that would have to come down.
Correct.
Are you planning on any other type of like shrubbery or screening for that area? Beside the fence or I presume it's a fence around the loading area and the dumpsters?
We haven't discussed that at length. It's been in, talking with Kevin on what other items that we will need in order to be, within code.
Okay. The silos on the front of the building, Mr. Ember had said they're approximately 40 feet, which is also to the, I presume it's the southernmost of the three, is basically 40 feet from the right-of-way line. Would you have a problem with a restriction of 40 feet? And that is in case there's anything that happens to those silos. It's going to be a lot of pressure on those silos from the inside out. And, you know,
All those silos will have, dust filters on the top. As you're blowing that in, that's how it's relieved of all that air. Most of the standard silos of this nature, 40 feet is sufficient height.
okay, I appreciate that. Anything else, gentlemen? Jason?
No.
Nate?
No.
Beth? Anyone in the audience and or on Zoom? Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
We don't have any additional testimony.
Okay, Ms. Shank, before we proceed, many papers. Oh, here it is. Okay, you're asking for four variances, correct?
That's correct.
That you stated in the beginning. Okay. Gentlemen, anything else before I turn?
Well,
Mr. Hanson?
talking with Mr. Hess, I don't think you'll need the fourth variance.
Okay.
Correct.
And I think we did posture that as if the board feels it's necessary. It's always our preference to ask for the relief, so it's advertised, but if you feel that it's unnecessary, we would tend to agree with that assessment, given that pre-existing non-conforming condition of the parking.
Then I would ask you, Ms. Shank, whether you want to amend the application to remove the fourth request.
Yes, we'll amend the application to withdraw the variance from section 270-8.4B1.
Okay, gentlemen, the request of the applicant is to amend the application to eliminate the request for a variance to section 270-8.4.B1. Can I have that as a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hanson. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Luce. Any discussion, gentlemen? Excuse me. Seeing none, Mr. Hanson,
In favor.
Mr. Luce.
In favor.
Mr. Kyle. In favor. And I also vote in favor. With that amendment, then you're seeking three variances, correct, Ms.
That's
Shank?
correct.
Okay. With that, we will conclude testimony in case number 2455. We will admit into evidence along with the application and oral testimony, applicants exhibits 1, 2, and 3. There's no administrative notice that I need to take. So with that, gentlemen, I will listen to a motion in case number 2455, if there is one this evening.
Mr. Chairman, case number 2455, request of Shanks Extracts LLC for property located at 350 Richardson Drive, Lancaster, PA 17603. Make a motion to grant the variance request to the following sections. Section 270 3.12 E2 to allow accessory structures in the front yard. Section 270 4.10 C2 to allow accessory structures also in the front yard. And section 270 4.4 B1 to allow for two trash dumpsters in the front yard. Since the third one's already set behind the building front.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion with the following conditions.
Okay.
Number one, the proposed loading area for the silos and the two roll-off dumpsters, that whole area has to be fully screened to whatever the township, whether it's fencing or plantings, depending whatever the township chooses. Two, silos cannot exceed 40 feet, including accessories. And three are standard conditions.
Okay, motion in case number 2455. Mr. Hanson, to the property owned by Shanks Extracts LLC at 350 Richardson Drive, Lancaster 17603. To grant 3 variances. First one being variance to section 270-3.12.E2 to allow accessory silo structures in the front yard. Variance to section 270-4.10.C2 authorize accessory silo structures in the front yard. And a variance to section 270-4.4.B1 to authorize 2 trash dumpsters within the front yard as shown on the submitted plan with the following conditions. 1, loading area and dumpster area shall be screened in accordance with township regulations. 2, that the 5 silos shown on the plan shall not exceed a height with accessories, not exceed a height of 40 feet. And 3, standard conditions that we apply to our decisions.
I'd like to add one more condition. Silos cannot be any closer than 40 feet from the right of way.
And for condition 4, that silos, any of the 5 silos cannot be any closer than 40 feet to the right of way. Okay. That was your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Luce. Discussion, gentlemen? Seeing none, Mr. Hanson?
Can I make a comment here?
Oh, yeah, comments before.
When I first looked at this, and I'm still of the opinion, there comes a certain point in time when the property can't be developed anymore. I was under the assumption that this was, they were manufacturing here. Since they are not, I am going to vote for this in favor. However, I think we have now reached the point where this has reached its maximum development area, and any other additions, they probably need to start looking at additional buildings somewhere else.
Anything else, gentlemen? Seeing none, Mr. Hanson?
In favor.
Mr. Luce?
In favor.
Mr. Kyle?
In favor.
I'll comment before I vote. I have problems with the structures being requested for a front yard. The zoning ordinance is very specific for that reason. I understand this building is already established. So part of my objection would be that if it would have been any additional construction. So I am going to vote in favor, but again, I have to agree with Mr. Hanson. It's a strange lot. The building is already there, and I I just hate to see stuff being put in front yards, but your request has been granted by a 4-0 vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, you okay? Beth, next case, please.
Case number 2456, Oak Tree Outdoor Advertising LP 2260 Dairy Road, seeking a variance to the sign regulations.
Is someone here from Horse Creek RELLC or the representative?
Okay, let's close that.
Excuse me. I asked for Horse Creek, but it is Oak Tree. You're right, correct. Sorry. Anyone in the audience and or on Zoom that wants to be a party to this case? Nobody on Zoom yet? Seeing none, Ms. Shank.
Again, I have some exhibits that I'd like to hand out before we start the presentation.
Do you have these listed separately, one of them separately?
They're all, yeah, one through four.
Okay. Thank you. Come in.
So good evening again, Claudia Shank from McNeese, Wallace and Nurick. I'm here on behalf of Oak Tree Outdoor Advertising LP. And I'm joined this evening by Devin Wagner, who is the president of Oak Tree.
Excuse me 1 minute. You said there were 4 exhibits?
That's correct.
You only handed me 3. Thank you.
So the property that we're here to discuss this evening is depicted on Exhibit 1 in your packet. It's an aerial map of the site. This is a tract containing approximately 10 acres. It's located south of Dairy Road. Our client, Oak Tree, is the tenant on the property. They have a lease to operate a billboard on the property. It is the site of Fillmore Container, and it is owned by Horse Creek RELLC. I'm sure the board probably recalls this property, is familiar with this property. I think you were all on the board when we were previously before you with an application related to this sign. The property, again, improved with a 70,000 square foot commercial building. It's in the enterprise zone. It's in the airport hazard overlay zone. Has unique topography and elevations as they relate to the right of way of Dairy Road and 283, which both run along the northern side of the property. In terms of the prior approvals related to this matter, the applicant originally obtained a conditional use approval from the Board of Supervisors to construct the billboard. That was received in March of 2021. That approval allowed us to move forward with seeking several variances from this board related to the construction of the billboard. The board did grant variance is to facilitate the construction of the billboard by decision that was dated April 14th, 2021. When we came before the board initially, we asked for the height of the billboard to be 45 feet. Ultimately, in discussion with the board during the hearing, we reduced that request to 36 feet and 8 inches, which is what was approved by the board. And that is to be consistent with the height of the building that's located on the property. So the board is now been constructed, it's operational. And based on some concerns about the visibility of the board at its current height, we're returning to ask the board to reconsider our prior request to increase the height of the board to 45 feet, which would be a variance from section 270-7.4 C6 of the zoning ordinance. I'll have Mr. Wagner come forward and introduce himself to the board.
1 second. Ms. Shank, do you have the prior case numbers?
I do. So the conditional use decision was case 20-07-01.
07-01.
That's correct.
Okay,
And the zoning hearing board decision was number 2426.
6. Thank you.
Certainly.
Good evening, Devin Wagner from Oak Tree Outdoor Advertising. I'm the president of Oak Tree, one of the co-founders, and I've been operating Oak Tree here in Lancaster for the past 8 years.
And obviously you're familiar with the property that's the subject of the application.
Yes, I am.
So the board that was constructed on this property, when was construction of the board complete?
It was complete January, February of 2022. This is past January.
So it's been operating there for about a full year now.
That is correct.
Could you turn to exhibit 2 in the exhibit packet? And let me hand you one here. And you'll see a photograph. Could you please identify or describe that picture for me?
The structure is, as indicated, steel structure, V panel with 2 digital faces, one facing in the west direction, one facing east.
So this is the board at 2260 Dairy Road. And it is at the height of 36 feet 8 inches. Could you turn to exhibit 3 in your packet, which is a series of photographs? And did you take those photographs? And can you describe what they're intended to depict?
They're intended to depict that in the viewing zone of this board, visibility is obscured by the elevation grade topography from 283 up to Dairy Road. Built on the south side of Dairy Road.
Mr. Wagner, could you just talk a little closer into that
Sure,
mic?
sorry about that. Can you hear that better? Okay.
Thank you.
So let's flip through those. The first photograph, approximately how many feet would you estimate you are from the board in that first picture?
This is probably about 350 feet from the board as you're traveling east on 283.
And could you flip to the second picture? Same question.
Maybe 100 additional feet east, probably about 250 feet from the board as you travel.
And the third photograph.
Probably another 100 feet. So you're probably at about 100 foot viewing distance from the board at that location.
And do the pictures depict fencing, vegetation, and also almost a berm along the roadway that decrease visibility of the board?
Yes, it does. And as you're probably aware, there was significant amount of trees that we had removed in order to make this build possible. With the removal of those trees, as well as the overgrown vegetation, has probably made this section of highway look a lot more attractive, and also alleviate some safety from those trees falling, whether or not on 283 or Dairy Road.
And in your opinion, is the billboard now not fully visible from several locations as you're driving in this direction?
That is my opinion, yes.
Do you believe if the board were increased to the 45 feet that was originally requested, that would increase visibility?
I think it would make the board be clear and visible within the viewing distance, the viewing zone, which is typically leading up to about from 500 feet towards the board.
We've talked about this somewhat, but again, what unique physical aspects of the property make it difficult for the board to be viewed at the height that it's currently constructed?
A couple issues. One, specifically the setback from the right of way and the position of Dairy Road running parallel to 283 provides an issue because of the distance from the roadway, as well as the grade from 283 to the position of the board with the high embankment, and then as well as the fence.
And do you believe that the 45 feet would be the minimum height that you could increase the board to so that it would be visible within that viewing range you just mentioned?
Yes, I do.
Have you discussed the relief that's being requested with your landlord or the property owner?
Yes, I have.
And did the property owner sign a letter indicating their support of the application?
Yes, Keith Reinhardt, who's the property owner, signed a letter stating he was in full agreement for the increase in height of this board on his property.
And could you turn to Exhibit 4 in your packet and tell me if that is a copy of the letter that the property owner provided to you? It's in the tab, I think.
Yes, this is the letter he provided.
I don't have any further questions for Mr. Wagner.
Questions, gentlemen? Mr. Hanson?
Yes. Beth, in a minute, not right at the second, but number one, can you increase the size of that a little bit? So what is the hardship here?
The hardship is the visibility of the board and for advertisers. So in one sense, it's a financial hardship because advertisers are not interested in the board because within the viewing zone, it's not being able to be clear.
So the courts have ruled that financial hardship is not a hardship.
So then second, it is also the fact as far as because the board is not clearly visible, it potentially is difficult for drivers to capture and see the advertisement and then be able to get their eyes back on the road.
If you're coming eastbound on 283 and you are west of where this picture is, you know where the suburban Provane is there?
I do, yes.
As you come around that bend, you can see the billboard. That's got to be close to 1,000+ feet away.
It's probably more than 1,000 feet, but the board at that distance is not legible.
So then as you come farther east, you get a better view of the billboard, but then you're blocked by some trees on a neighboring property. Is that correct?
You can see the board from that distance, correct?
And then once you get closer to the board, the trees are no longer blocking your view. And then you're saying that within about 250 feet, you lose the billboard?
Actually, from the whole kind of viewing zone, which is roughly 500 feet to the board, you lose visibility of the board. You have an obstructed view. You probably might see 20 to 30% of the board at any given time.
You chose to put the billboard there. That was because if you can remember back to the first meeting, I suggested you move it to farther east on the property. And you said you hadn't talked to the property owner about doing it there. So if you had moved it farther east, you wouldn't have this issue. You chose to put it there. By doing that, you can't use that as a hardship.
There was some limitations on the eastern portion of the site, one being based off of PennDOT's ordinance and being in proximity to on and off ramps. So prohibited being too far east. I know there was a pre-existing board on this site already, but that was a non-conforming board based off of the current ordinance for PennDOT.
But you never even asked PennDOT about it, did you?
It doesn't matter. If you're within a township, anything outside of a city, you can't be within 500 feet of an exit ramp or an on-ramp.
Can I interrupt?
Sure. Okay, with that statement that you just made, you still knew that there was a bump in the road there. You were in front of us before where the shrubbery was along the right of way, whether it was on PennDOT side or the townships. Somebody took that shrubbery down. I don't know who it was, whether it was the township and or the PennDOT. But the property has not changed from day one, yet you still put it there.
Correct.
What is the hardship of that property that you didn't know when you put it there?
So the site has been, with the removal of the trees, removal of all the excess brush in order to create visibility for the board within the viewing zone. We thought based off of the height that we were able to, in front of you, get approval to build, that we would be able to have a board that was visible. After building the board, it's partially visible, but it's impaired. And we're just asking if that we could have an increase in height. So we have a fully visible board on this roadway for eastbound traffic.
This is the request that we originally had before the board. This is what was allowed for by the supervisors. And I understand that we've agreed to reduce the height, but
The supervisors only agreed to allow you to put it there. They didn't say you had to put it there. The request of the conditional use is, can we put a billboard in that location? And the supervisor said yes. But the supervisors did not say that you had the ability to put a billboard there and exceed the height restrictions. That's why you were in front of us. During the discussion and everything, and what Mr. Hanson had previously said, it was brought to the attention of everyone in the room that night that there were potential site obstructions to that location. The applicant still went forward with it. What is the hardship on the property that the applicant hasn't created?
I think we previously stated that was essentially the only location the board could go on the property.
But that does not mean that you have to put it there. There is no court case out there that I know of that says that because an applicant, or should say a business person, applicant, whatever, wants to go to a particular site, that the municipality has to allow that site.
I'm not suggesting that's the case, but the board is permitted or was permitted in this location on this property. We did need some modification of the zoning ordinance in order to facilitate the construction. And I will correct one point regarding the conditional use approval. You're absolutely correct. The Board of Supervisors did not have the ability to grant us a height variance. But what they did do is put in their decision that if we received a variance to go up to a maximum of 45 feet, we did not have to return to their board in order to modify the conditional use.
Right, and this board said no. Based on the ordinance, we still give you some relief. But again, I traveled down that road twice in the last 2 days, saw what was up on that billboard. I wasn't paying attention to reading what was on it because I was more concerned about whether I could see it or not in the location. You can see it better on the passing lane than you can on the traveling lane. Until you hit where 2 trees happen to block the view of that billboard, which again, is on another parcel of property. So I'm still questioning, what is the hardship of the land that wasn't created by the applicant?
I don't think we created any of the conditions of the property. I will agree with you. We selected the site, but we've done everything we can to minimize the relief, including building a board at a height which is lower than what we thought was necessary in hopes of trying to resolve this matter in a way that would be agreeable to the board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hanson, I interrupted you.
When you were here last time, we gave you just about a 12-foot variance to the height of the billboard, correct?
That's correct.
Would you say that was reasonable?
Yes, I think it was reasonable. I think
So-
we attempted to be reasonable in reducing our request to address the concerns the board had, and I appreciate what the board did.
So we granted you a reasonable variance. But now you're saying you want it higher because that's not enough.
I don't
You
think
can't
what-
have it, you can't have it both ways. It was either reasonable or it wasn't reasonable. You're saying it was reasonable. So then why are you here trying to go higher?
So first of all, we voluntarily adjusted our request at the last meeting based on the discussion we had with the board. So our request for 45 feet wasn't denied or rejected. In conversation with the board, we understood that there was a concern about keeping it to the maximum height of the building, and that was why we withdrew or modified our request. I'm not suggesting that what the board did previously is unreasonable. I don't think that this minor increase to the height is unreasonable either in order to ensure that the board's fully visible.
You're asking for about another 9 feet of height.
That's correct.
So you would have a variance that is giving you, basically 20 feet over the height of what is allowed in the zoning ordinance. What you just said was what we granted you last time was reasonable. So I'm still, and going back to what Mr. Herr said here, what is the hardship? There's no unnecessary hardship here. You chose to put it in that, or not you, your client chose to put it in that location. You can't come back here and use that as a hardship because that's where you wanted the location.
We'll say the intention when we constructed the board at the 36-foot height was, it was our hope and anticipation that it would work and be fully visible at that height. You know, we were in,
It is fully visible at height. As you're coming past Suburban Propane, that billboard is fully visible. And I've been down in the last 3 days, I've been by it twice.
I think what Mr. Wagner is referring to is there's a viewing range within which the board should be fully visible at all times.
Right. I mean, so basically, I think it comes down to on the board, the font, size of font, the size of an advertising word or somebody's logo. It's 10 feet for every inch of font. So yes, can you see the board, the light of the board from 1,500 feet away? You could probably see it from double that. You could probably see it from 3,000 feet away, but it's not legible. It's not legible for the advertiser to see it, and it's not for the person that's driving by that you can able to comprehend exactly what it is. That's why there's that viewing zone 500 feet and closer to the board to be able to see the board, be able to recall the message, glance at it for a couple seconds, and put your eyes back on the road.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, gentlemen? Jason?
Yeah, I have a couple. So there have not been any changes on the actual site. And I'm not talking about any change, and I realize that some of the shrubbery along the right of way has been removed, but there haven't been any changes to the land, this property itself, since the original application, correct?
That is correct.
And the photos that you submitted, which are exhibit 3,
Hey, Jason, could you talk closer to your mic, please?
oh, yeah, sorry about that. The photos that you submitted as exhibit 3, are you all the way in the travel lane when those photos were taken? Because it seems that you could be over the line. I just want to, were you in the travel lane?
I believe I was in the travel lane. It could have been with my phone, and it was my passenger that was taking the picture.
So your passenger may have been just holding the phone outside the window or something?
I believe it was a phone, iPhone. It was an iPhone, and it was horizontal. And then cropped the photo just from the left-hand side of the picture, I believe. Fit, but
Okay, but you're saying you were all the way in the travel lane?
I believe so. I don't recall if my right tire was on the white line or not.
Okay. And and where on the property, so you're saying that the 500 feet from an off-ramp exists on that, eastern portion of the property there?
So for the ramp that's coming off of Roarstown Road, I don't believe it's, if we were where the pre-existing billboard was, which actually didn't meet the necessary setbacks based off of the ordinance, it wouldn't, it would be, within the 500 feet from the ramp that's for westbound traffic.
And I believe we were also juggling that with the proximity of another board along 283, if I recall correctly, to find that little window where a board could be constructed.
It's where the road comes, it becomes 24 feet again, is where, the ramp.
I just put this up on here.
Okay, and then, when you, were reciting sort of the history of this matter, you also, I don't know if you mentioned, but you also asked to amend the previous, decision, and the board voted to deny that request, correct? At some point after you received the original decision, there was a request made to the board to amend that decision. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that. I do recall that there was some discussion, I believe, with the zoning officer about the interpretation of the decision.
Okay, well, there was I have a letter, I know it was before this board because I had a letter sent to you memorializing the board's decision.
Yes, and if I recall correctly, I think that was as to how the height was to be measured of the board. I think it was really a matter of interpretation of the decision, so I don't know that we were asking specifically for it to be amended, but for an interpretive issue to be adjudicated, which apparently the board.
Yeah, I
Wasn't
think,
going to-
I think that's an accurate characterization of it. I think there was a, that you wanted the height of the building to be measured differently.
I think
but
that's
the-
correct.
But the board did deny that request.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, thanks. Yeah, I don't have anything else.
Nate,
I do not know.
Beth,
No.
Mr. Hanson?
So again, you're asking for a dimensional variance. And in your narrative, you cited Hertzberg, correct?
Correct.
So the court has ruled that as long as a reasonable adjustment to the zoning regulations in order to use the property in manner consistent with the applicable regulations.
Yes.
The property is built to the applicable regulations because the building was built within the confines of the zoning ordinance, correct?
As far as I'm aware.
You came before us and asked for an increase in height. We gave you a reasonable variance of several feet. So Hertzberg doesn't apply here at this. Because we've given you what you asked for in the past, and now you're trying to exceed that. And everything was developed within the confines of the zoning regulations.
I would say I disagree with that statement. I don't think that the fact that the board was reasonable previously makes our request now unreasonable. I don't think it's that significant of a deviation to say we're being unreasonable now and were previously reasonable. I don't know that can be measured in that way. I think we're asking for a reasonable modification. I think what the board granted in the past was reasonable. I don't mean to imply that it wasn't. We had hoped that it would be sufficient. It was not sufficient. So that's why we're back.
And I can't speak for the rest of the board members here, but I still don't, you haven't given me a hardship here.
So
I can see that billboard. I can read that billboard. So again, what is the hardship?
So on a federal and a state level, there's no height requirements or restrictions on billboards. And I'm not saying this is the case on this specific roadway, but just give you an example. Sound barriers are being used more and more often throughout the state and throughout the country for that matter. And because of those sound barriers, even non-conforming boards are being permitted to be rebuilt in height and overall structure of the board to go above and beyond the sound barrier, road widening, or other types of grades that are taking place on a statewide or national level, because there's no restriction on height specifically. There's restriction on size of a billboard face, but not on the height of the board. And I think that's where this specific site, like Claudia had stated, we tried to go with the height that was granted. We're thankful for it. Obviously, we built it. We're seeing that it's not visible within that zone. We have and continue to partake in the requirements of the permit from the stuff with Amber Alerts, having our contact information on East Hempfield as well as the state police to be able to utilize that for any necessary emergency management in the community. It's helping support the community with the businesses that are on it. Obviously, there's been large scale development on state road. We have the medical facilities on there, hiring campaigns that are all supporting the economics of East Hempfield as well as the county of Lancaster. And with the visibility of that board within the zone can only be helpful and beneficial to all those things that I stated above.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, gentlemen? Mr. Kyle?
Is 45 feet the minimum relief you would need to make it better? I don't know what the cost benefit is to changing it to 40 feet, or is that pretty much?
I believe 45 feet is the number that we need to. The structure is not built that it would be able to be built any higher based on the current configuration with the foundation.
But a lesser amount would not be beneficial. I mean, if it was.
I don't believe so based on
45 or nothing.
what we're seeing with the height of the fence as well as the embankment there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone in the audience or Zoom questions for this witness? Anyone on Zoom? Yeah. Okay, seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Shank.
No further testimony.
Okay, and you're asking for the one variance to 277.4.C6, correct?
Correct section. (70-7.4C6), correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, gentlemen, we will conclude testimony in case number 2456.
Mr. Chairman, just as a reminder, I don't believe you did it before. The board should take administrative notice of the decision in case number 2426. The conditional use decision of the Board of Supervisors, and I think it was case 20-07-01.
Right,
Okay.
7-0.
And the letter dated September 29, 2021, which was memorializing the board's decision on the request to amend the original decision.
Yeah, that's what I was at this time. So, we will take administrative notice to the conditional approval, case number 20-70-01. Also, take administrative notice of the zoning hearing board case number 2426. We'll also add to the record the letter September 29th, 2021, memorializing, if I can speak, this zoning hearing board to amend the original decision. We will also add into evidence, along with the written and oral testimony, applicants exhibits 1, 2, 3, and 4. With that, gentlemen, I will listen to a motion in case number 2456 at this time, if there is one.
Mr. Chairman, in case number 2456, the request of Oak Tree Outdoor Advertising for a variance to section 270-7.4.C6. Make a motion to deny the request due to the lack of a hardship.
Okay, excuse me. Case number 2456, Mr. Hanson makes the motion for property located at 2260 Dairy Road by Oak Tree Outdoor Advertising LP for a variance to section 270-7.4.C6 to deny the request due to a lack of stipulated hardship.
That is correct.
Do I have a second, gentlemen?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Luce. Discussion, gentlemen? Seeing none, Mr. Hanson.
In favor.
Mr. Luce?
In favor.
Mr. Kyle?
In favor.
And I'll also vote in favor. Your request in case number 2456 has been denied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your time. Beth? Anything else this evening? Meeting next month, probably.
So have you two figured out if it's one or two cases or?
Well,
I'm gonna go with your,
I
what
think
you
it's gonna
say.
be 2.
Okay, good.
Okay. Third Monday is Martin Luther King. Will the township be off that Monday? Okay, so you're gonna be working so we can have it then? Cheryl? Jason? Okay.
I'm available.
Okay, then, we will have a case on January 16th, or have a meeting on January 16th, excuse me. With that, seeing there's no other business this evening, everyone please have a Merry Christmas. Hope Santa Claus is good to all of you. I know some cases that could be difficult, but I'll still hopefully that you'll get it.
Now you look at me.
I'm looking, actually
Okay.
looking over that one. I mean, the furthest one is an attorney, so you know there it's gonna be a little difficult, so.
Getting
but-
cold again this year, I guess.
Can I make a request on the next time? I don't know who puts these up here, but can we pull our agendas up on here or? Because I know right on here, I have the Township Planning Commission.
If you get
Yeah,
out of
you
there,
probably got the wrong one.
Well, that's what I'm just saying. It's just like, if you,
go to the first one. There. now scroll
You gotta go
down.
down.
okay. I just don't know. I don't use this. I use an iPad. I'm just like, what is going on here? So I just pull my iPad back up.
With nothing else, we'll see you in next January. It will be reorganization also, the meeting, so please, everyone have a happy and safe holiday.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mr. Bingham his term is up in January, so I haven't heard from him. Kind of assumed he would be here tonight to ask him if he wishes to continue.
Okay, well. That's the board's decision. That's not ours, so.
Just so you're aware.
Yeah, okay, with that, we'll conclude tonight's meeting. So we're off the record. Gentlemen, Mr. Kyle is going to have to recuse himself. I'm not sure he has to, but he is going to, just because it'll be easier. So without Mr. Bingham, for sure, if we, yeah,
Yeah,
I'll be here.
Yeah.
okay, so,
I can
We'll
be
do
here for
that.
the other case, but I don't know
yeah.
what else is.
Well,
Uh,
actually,
Oh, yeah, that might be the number two.
all we need to do is have you here present to start the meeting.
No, that's true, because I figured I'd take part in the reorganization. And then
Mhm.
myself for my case. but-
Yeah. But
She puts that
if
one
they put,
second.
yeah,
Anyway.
hey
Yeah,
Beth,
You were counting mine and then possibly another case, right? For the two.
Yours was the second one.
Okay, so there's already
The
another
attorney
one.
Just called today about yours.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I reminded him to make sure he did that.
The other one's a sign on embassy that doesn't meet the setback requirements.
a sign. Oh, great.
And this one. Favorite. One's reasonable, just figure out how they're gonna go about it. Which was the question I had for you?
I can argue it.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't like it. It's like,
Um,
the idea behind it, some